Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending the session this morning, which is about the upcoming 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. I'm Lauren Roberts. I'm the Saratoga County historian, and I'm also a trustee on the board of AFNI's. Just a few housekeeping things for the conference. If you did not get a conference evaluation form, I have extras up here. They should be in your folders, but if you didn't get one, you can come up and grab one and fill it out and drop it off at the at the table on your way out. The more thought that you put into these will only help us make the conference better for next year. So we appreciate your honest feedback on the programming, on the venue, all of those things. So please fill them out. After the next session, or if you're leaving early, please remember to return your AFNI's lanyards. You can drop them right back off at the table so that we can have them for next year, unless you really, really want to take them home with you and wear them around. And thank you all for attending the conference. I'm hoping this is, obviously you've survived the first 2 days, right? This is the third and final day. We appreciate all of you coming, and we hope that you've gotten something out of it that you can take back to your own communities and pass on from there. So this morning, we're going to talk about the 250th commemoration of the American Revolution, which is mostly going to begin in 2025. It sounds like it's a long time away, but it's really not. We need to start planning now for the big events. Thank you. We have 3 people that are speaking this morning. The first is our very own Big Cheese, John Scherer. Big Cheese. If you were at the dinner last night, John got a big award for his time in AFNI's. He's been on the board for the last 22 years since the beginning of AFNI's. He'll be leaving the board at the end of the year. So we did acknowledge his commitment and his service and let him know how grateful we are for all of his mentorship over the last several decades. It was all about the mustache. And for those of you that are joining us online, the password is an homage to John. So John Scherer, here's a little bit about his background. He is the historian for the town of Clifton Park and senior historian emeritus for the New York State Museum. He has his MA in Museum Studies from the Cooperstown Graduate Program. He's published numerous books and articles on local history, genealogy, New York decorative arts, and popular entertainment, and lectures widely on those subjects. For a number of years, he taught a graduate course on material culture studies at the University of Albany. Scherer has served as an officer in a number of professional organizations and friends groups, including our own. And then we also have Devin Lander, who is the New York State historian. He was the executive director of the Museum Association of New York before he was named state historian. And he holds a BA in history from the SUNY Plattsburgh and his master's in public history from the University of Albany, where he is currently a PhD student. He's also the co-host of the podcast New York Minute in History, which is produced by WAMC Northeast Public Radio, and co-editor of the New York History Journal, published by Cornell University Press. And then we have Johanna Porr. She is the Orange County historian, a position she has held since 2014. Previously, she worked at Washington's headquarters as a tour guide. She was the director of the Newburgh Historical Society. She's got a particular interest in topics relating to the Revolution in the Hudson Valley. She's been an outspoken advocate for the preservation of the Fishkill Supply Depot. She participated in the creation of the Washington Rochambeau Trail and recently led an archaeological dig at Wiegand's Tavern. So I'm going to turn it over to these panelists. John's going to give us a little bit of history about commemorations, past commemorations of the American Revolution. And then we'll go to Devin at the state level, and he's going to let us know what's going on. And then Johanna at the community and regional level. And we're hoping that this will be a discussion because all of us need to be directly involved in planning for these types of commemorations. How are we going to do, what should we be doing now? How should we start the planning? What are the stories that involve our community that directly relate to the revolution? So hopefully we will get some ideas from the panelists. And then if you'd like to share your own ideas or if you have questions, we're hoping that this will be a discussion. For those of you online, you can enter your questions or comments in the chat and we will address those also. So thank you. You're up, Big Cheese.
Thank you, Lauren. In this conference, the theme has been watershed moments. And if the bicentennial of the American Revolution was one of those, truly one of those moments, which we celebrated, of course, in 1976, it brought an interest in history to the general public that continues on today. Local historians became involved with their communities as working on bicentennial events. So the local historians became more than just people to answer genealogy questions. They got involved with the histories of their communities and celebrating it during the bicentennial. New historians, many of our historians today were inspired by the celebrations of the bicentennial. There were essay contests. A number of professional historians that I know entered those essay contests. Some of them won, but they were inspired by the celebrations and the work of the bicentennial. Historical societies grew up. As I say, everyone got interested in the history, basically, of their communities. Local histories, every town, village, they published local histories. This is the one that we did for Clifton Park. And so when you go to the library and look for histories of communities, you'll find that a lot of these were published 1975 through 1978 as a result of the bicentennial. It was the beginning of the preservation movement. People got interested in preserving the visible heritage of their communities. It was the death knell for urban renewal and just blanketly removing all old buildings. Preservation societies were organized. And reenactors. This is the beginning of the reenacting movement. The Brigade of the American Revolution was formed. So it had a tremendous impact on our history. I sort of in a kind of an interesting position because I saw the bicentennial from two perspectives. I started work at the Office of State History in 1967, and they were to administer the bicentennial program on behalf of the federal government here in New York State. And I was also the chair of my local bicentennial commission. So I'll use my glasses here so I can read this stuff. But the New York State Bicentennial Commission was created in 1968. And the commission consisted of 21 citizens, 11 who were appointed by the governor of New York. And the chair was John Pell. He was the chair. But it was the Office of State History that would administer the program here. And the executive director was the state historian, who at that time was Len Tucker. And eventually he had a staff. By about 1973, there was a staff to oversee the bicentennial. So there was Tom Felt, who was the deputy executive director. There was Rick Allen, and there was a fourth member whose name I can't remember. At any rate, we had a staff to administer the program. And of course, they had the entire Office of State History at their disposal to help with this. The commission made films. They sponsored symposia and essay contest and supported publications. They had quite a publication program throughout the entire bicentennial, which was to go until 1981. And as I said, the commission was created in 1968, so they got an early start. I just brought a handful of the publications that they did, and the logo for the State Bicentennial Commission was these 6 cannonballs stacked up in pyramid fashion. Bumper stickers, etc. So they also did they promoted the microfilming of historical records. They did various performing arts programs and sponsored a reenactment group called the Brigade of the American Revolution. Other commission activities included publishing a quarterly newsletter, which was called The Correspondent, which was published from 1970 to 78. But their they did a couple films also. One was called And Take Me by the Hand. Don't Tread on Me was another one. And then the third film was The Other Side of Victory. So they did a lot, but the biggest project that the state did was the New York Festival Barge, the Bicentennial Barge. And this was a floating exhibit on the American Revolution in New York. And I was involved with that. I remember going down to Staten Island to bring the artifacts down and install them in the exhibit. Spent a week down in Staten Island. And the first venue for the barge was Manhattan, and it docked right there in the East River. And it began its voyage through the waterways of New York State. And as curators, I was a curator at the time, and we had to check on the collections at every port that it put into. So we got to travel around the state to do that. But that was a mammoth undertaking. They converted an old railroad barge. So, but the most important thing that was done was this idea of being a bicentennial community. This was a federal program, but as I say, it was administered by the state. So when I knew I was going to be speaking today, I went up to the town hall and looked back at some of the records. And I've got the application that we had to fill out to become a bicentennial community. And practically every community in New York State became a bicentennial community. And in order to do that, you had to meet certain requirements. So the application includes Appendix A, where you have to list the members of your bicentennial commission and the organizations that they belong to. Then Appendix B is you have to list down what you're going to be doing during the celebration, and your celebration had to fit into 3 different themes: Heritage 76, Festival USA, or Horizons 76. So I'll read this thing. In listing these activities on this form, we understand that the inclusion of at least one activity for each of the 3 thematic areas, Heritage 76, Festival USA, Horizon 76, is highly desired by the National American Revolution Bicentennial because it increases awareness of the full scope of the nation's bicentennial program, a past to remember, a future to mold. We also understand that we must have at least one lasting reminder marked with an X. We acknowledge that the American Revolution Bicentennial expects complete thematic coverage, not necessarily in the beginning, but at least during the full development and exposure of our bicentennial community program. So as I say, I was the chair for Clifton Park. So our projects, we published the town history, which I showed you, which was published in 1975. So that covered Heritage 76. The other project was acquisition of a history room in the town hall and necessary equipment to preserve early town records, manuscripts, photographs, maps, and histories. And this was, we had a history advisory committee in town. So this was Horizon 76. And both of those were lasting reminders of the bicentennial. Those are things that would go on. Festival USA, we had a celebration in October 18th, 1975, to commemorate the bicentennial and also the 150th anniversary of the opening of the Erie Canal, since that goes through our town. This was an important event in the community's history. A special museum exhibit relating to the canal and town history would open this day. Performances by the Brigade of the American Revolution. We had a bake sale of 18th century recipes. An exhibit of crafts would highlight this day's celebration. This was something that we had started in 1973, this Canal Day, the Fisher Ferry Association. So what we did was we just put it in there as a festival that would be sponsored by the town at this point, and it made it bigger. We also had people conducting oral histories. We had a couple tables set up, and people could walk up and talk about their, and some of these people were still alive who worked on the canal, and we got some wonderful material, firsthand information about the canal from these people. And of course, this was in 1975. These people are all gone now. The fourth project, which fit under Horizon 76, was the restoration and beautification of a 1900 bridge abutment in the Mohawk River near the old Erie Canal. So that was another project. So anyway, so we submitted that, and then we get a letter back. We were accepted as a bicentennial community. We are very pleased to announce, this is October 1975, we are very pleased to announce a designation of your community as an official bicentennial community. And this is from the American Revolution Bicentennial Administration. And along with that, we got a booklet. So it's now we're allowed to use the logo, the official logo. And this is the cover of a booklet that showed how to use that logo, when to use it, etc. So this was, and we also got a flag with the same logo on it, bicentennial flag. So all the bicentennial communities had this flag that they would fly over their town hall or have at their different, and I found this letter that I wrote to the town supervisor at the time. This is November 75 after our designation. I said, Clifton Park has recently received official designation as a bicentennial community. It is the recommendation of the Clifton Park Bicentennial Committee that a ceremony marking this designation should be held in the town hall during the month of December. This will also coincide with the publication of the town's bicentennial book, Crossroads and Canals, The History of the Town of Clifton Park, and placement on the National Register of the Fisher Ferry Historic District. This was another thing that was going on at the time. Inasmuch as there has not yet been an official dedication or open house for the new addition to the town office building, it seems that this occasion could also be tied into a festive holiday community affair in the form of an open house honoring the past and the future of the town of Clifton Park. The Bicentennial Committee respectfully submits these recommendations, et cetera. And so that actually happened. This is a brochure that we had for our Canal Day in 1975. And then for 76, we did, well, on July 4th, which was our Sunday, 1976, at 1:30 that afternoon, we assembled at the middle school, Shenandoah campus, around the flagpole. We had a community sing, then we had an invocation, we had the flag presentation by Congressman Ned Pattison, and the flag raising. We had a color guard from Troop 45, the Boy Scouts. We had the Pledge of Allegiance. We sang the national anthem, introduction of guests, welcoming remarks by the town supervisor, remarks by Congressman Ned Pattison, History of Clifton Park by myself, chair of the Bicentennial Committee, and then we had a benediction. And our big celebration was actually on July 5th, where we had a community picnic. And at 11:45, well, at noon, we had a parade, which had the Fife and Drum Corps, Continental Marines, antique cars, convertibles with Clifton Park families, dignitaries, and it was a big parade, bands, et cetera. 1 o'clock, we had a family picnic. bring your own or purchase on the grounds. We had a watermelon eating contest, decorated cake contest, coordinated fire demonstrations, and then the fireworks at night at 9 o'clock. So those were some of the things that that we did, but it was, again, the whole state got involved on the local level. And we had some really good things that came out of that. And it was certainly a watershed moment.
Thank you, John. One of the things that we quickly realized at the state level as we were trying to think through the 250th, as we're rapidly approaching, is that, as John noted, the Bicentennial Commission in New York started 8 years before the actual 76, main events. So we are behind the 8 ball right now, and the pandemic didn't help at all. So, one of the things that, as we were thinking through this at the state level, the first thing we did was bring together the agencies that are tasked with historic mission at the state level. So the State Museum, Library, Archives, state parks, and also our tourism promotion agency, I Love New York. Some of our federal partners like Saratoga Battlefield were involved in the very early meetings in 2018. And we started to, formulate an idea, like what would this look like? Thinking about the bicentennial, thinking about some of the other commissions that had been in place at the state level, some successful, some not, frankly. And we decided pretty quickly that one thing we were going to kind of try to model after the bicentennial was this local involvement, right? That's where this whole thing is going to be driven from. The state can play a coordinating role, but the communities and the institutions at the local level really are vital for seeing this happen and seeing events take place and commemoration take place. That was the other thing we quickly realized in our discussions, was that the difference between a celebration and a commemoration, it was clear to us that we wanted to engage with communities that had not been previously engaged with for whatever reason, or chose not to be engaged with. And that was decided for a variety of reasons. Number one, history is complex, and we wanted to ensure that the history of this era in New York State was told from all perspectives. And the other reason we quickly determined that this was the way forward was the idea of engaging with new audiences. It's important that we have as many people at the table during this period as possible. And so we started to think about audiences that might not see themselves in these type of commemorations, new communities to the state, from immigrant communities and things like that. So how do we engage with as many diverse audiences as we can in the state? And New York State obviously continues to be one of the most diverse places in North America. So how do we engage with these people? How do we engage with, for example, the indigenous community? And so we quickly decided that we would try our best to do a series of listening tours, which we were able to accomplish 4 of them before the pandemic, where we went around the state and met with people that worked in the field, and historians and institutions, and talked about, what should our model be? And one of the things that came out of those discussions, which were very useful to hear from people who are actually like you, who are actually doing the work, was that we should talk about not only the revolution and the period before and during, which of course is essential and really the basis of all of this, but kind of the history since 1776 in New York. So one of the ways to engage with new audiences is to, and at the same time, talk about the complexities of the revolution, like who was left out and who was displaced and things like this, is to talk about how the ideals of the revolution have been modified over time, and this continuing struggle for the concept of liberty and equality has taken place, and New York has played a huge role in that, right? 1848, Seneca Falls, Stonewall, Triangle, on and on, all the way up to today. It's a continuing movement. So we heard from the field that this is how people are engaging with new audiences, with history, is talking about the complexity as well as the evolution of some of these ideals. So we came up with the idea of kind of branding this Revolutionary New York, because it's revolutionary, and John, of course, he came up with that. But it's, you know, it's a way to engage in sites of revolution beyond the revolution, without losing focus on the actual events that took place in New York and the role that New York obviously played in the American Revolution itself, Saratoga and the various battles, and you know, the leadership that came out of New York at the time. So it's not an attempt to discount the actual events, but it's an attempt to expand on those and at the same time talk about the complexities. So it's an ongoing process, and you know, of course, the pandemic shut everything down for a while, but we have been engaging with the America 250 Commission. They have had a series of meetings pretty regularly, almost every month, with kind of the states who are doing things right now. So there's about 25 states that are kind of actively either have a commission in place or are working towards a commission, like New York, and are doing work. So we meet pretty regularly, and it's through these meetings that America 250's come up with its kind of platform, of which there are 14, which you can see at the America 250 website. And this is informing the work of the federal commission. And in turn, it will inform the work of the state commission. So the way that the federal commission, and I assume it was the same way in 1976, but it may not have been, but the way they are looking to operate is as a coordinating entity at the federal level. And they are going to leave the decision-making up to the states. What you want to emphasize, what as long as it fits within their framework. So, which is pretty broad. Almost everything fits into their framework because they have the same end goal that I think we have at the state level, which is expanding the audience and also talking about some of the history that hasn't been talked about in the past. And then also they're dealing with the reality that, you know, there were 13 colonies. Most of the 50 states didn't exist. So how do you engage with places that didn't exist during the revolution and you didn't have sites of revolution like New York did, or battles or anything like that? So that, you know, so they're expansive in their vision. And as a result, New York is going to be expansive, and we were already going down that road anyway. So it's good to know that America 250, that's what they're thinking too. And then listening to the other states is very useful. Many of our neighbors are ahead of us, including New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Vermont just passed a commission, so they're technically ahead of us. But of course, they were part of New York. But anyway, there was no Vermont, as I let them know. So, but anyway, it's useful to hear what other commissions are doing and how similar kind of the concepts are at their level as well. One of the things that's making New York somewhat unique And different than America 250 is that, so America 250, the commission ends in 26. Actually, it ends technically in January 27. But our commission, as the legislation is written now, when it's enacted, will be in effect until 2033. So we're similar to what John did. We are looking at doing, the entirety of the revolutionary years. And yes.
Yeah, the original bicentennial was supposed to go through 1981. However, to celebrate the bicentennial, the state ended up firing the state historian in 1976, and they defunded the Bicentennial Commission in 1979. So it was scheduled to go to 1981, but didn't make it quite that far. And from the bicentennial celebration, we went right into the bicentennial of the United States Constitution. So that's something else. And New York was one of the first states to ratify the Constitution. So that's something else to look forward to.
Let's hope that history doesn't repeat itself and the state historian does not get fired right after this. So yeah, that was an unfortunate thing. But anyway, John, you're right. And the other thing that John mentioned was the Erie Canal, which is coming up in 25, which is not necessarily part of the legislation, but it's certainly part of what we're thinking about as we move towards 25 being our, hopefully, the governor signs our bill, the 25 being the real kickoff for what we're doing. And that will be hopefully the launch of our website. And well, the website will be in place before then, but the public launch of many of these initiatives. So, the other thing that John talked about was the bicentennial communities. America 250 is actually thinking about doing something very similar. They call them something different, but it's essentially an opportunity for communities to nominate themselves and then become part of the America 250. And it would include things like marketing and logos, and very similar to what was happening in the bicentennial. They are kind of, I've seen it really started this year. They really have staffed up at the federal level. There was like 2 people for a long time, and now there's several. And they're really starting to do some outreach, and they launched the logo, and they had a launch in New York City and other places. New York City is being named one of the, I think there's 4 cities in the nation that America 250 is focusing on for July 4th of 26. New York City is 1, Boston, Philadelphia, and I believe Charleston. And these communities are being looked at as having major events for the 4th of July on 26. And so there's been meetings with the city and what they will be doing on top of what's happening at the state level. So New York stands to benefit from this. As John noted, there was an injection of public interest in history. There were historical societies that were formed, many that we charter. We look at their incorporation date, and it's during this era. We realized that New York is uniquely positioned with the local government historians to have direct connection already in place, historians already in communities, already working, who can be kind of the conduit for what the State Commission is doing, as well as our state historic sites and other museums and historical societies, of course, our national parks. All of this will be a direct conduit to the commission. So the commission is going to play a coordinating role, much like it did in the bicentennial. Many of the same activities, programming, education, exhibits, publications, be they online or printed, and reenactments, all of that is part of the vision. But there's that other component, which is these sites of revolution beyond 250 years ago as well. So that really opens the door to other sites and other eras in New York's history and how that plays into the discussion.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I have good news for you all, which is that we don't have to be only expansive in our approach to this semi-quincentennial. We in New York are all places that have so much local history that we can be both. And I think that a lot of the other states almost have no other choice than to try to look very creatively at how to tie into the bicentennial, or sorry, semi-quincentennial. But we don't have to do that. We can take our local stories and we can start from the bottom up and move into these much larger themes. So when Devin had his meetings in 2018, 19, around that time, I guess you had 3 of them. I think I attended 2 of them. We started to feel very nervous on a local level because he was telling us that the bicentennial had planned 8 years in advance and that there are all of these different details that he's just shared with you. So we definitely had this feeling of urgency, and I went back to some of my local municipal historians and discussed what could be done to put a commission together. And we looked back at our bicentennial paperwork as well, because we had a nice archive showing what the county historian what was his name? Donald Clark in the 1970s had done. So we had a model. We had a county historian in the 1970s who had been the chair of a at the time bicentennial commission. And we had a model for how he had tapped into the local village and town historians to serve on that commission, as well as some of the local politicians and community members. So right away, put together a proposal to the county executive. I know some of you have county executive form of government. Some of you have a group of legislators or board of supervisors. So you can do it in different ways, different approaches. But we went to the county executive and put together a proposal and asked him to create a commission. And he did it within about a 6-week period. He turned it around. So that's the wonderful thing about the local level, the responsiveness that, I know it's a lot more problematic on the state level, just getting the attention that something like this deserves. So our county executive, Steve Newhouse, he put the executive order together. He passed it immediately, signed it immediately. And that allowed us to have an open commission from the current date that he signed it all the way until what we just determined would be the end of our commission, commemorating 1783. So 2033, and that's how long we'll have a commission going. We didn't want to fall into the trap of the bicentennial where the funding runs out or the interest runs out halfway through the commemoration, especially because Washington's headquarters in West Point and some of the other sites that are in Orange County have significant events that take place at the end of the war and the disbanding of the Army. So we have this open commission created. We've decided to do a 3-year term for individuals that want to serve on it. And the purpose of doing that was because we want to get as many people as possible through the ranks of it, hoping that that'll create a lot of buy-in, and then we'll end up with a body of many people who have served on it in the past or currently serving on it as the time goes on. So by the end of it, we'll have a lot of names of participants and people that had some influence over the commission. We advertised in the papers asking for people to send us a resume and cover letter of why they want to be on the commission, and got applicants in, and we were lucky. We actually ended up with 12 people applying for a 13-person, or sorry, with 11 people applying for a 13-person commission where I would be the chair. So we only needed to go and search out one more person to add, and we were able to do that. And so now we have 13 individuals serving for the first 3 years, and they are very excited to be part of the early planning, whereas some of the other local historians said to me at the time, I'm very interested in being on the commission sometime later when we're getting to planning events or doing on the ground work. So it was nice. People self-selected as to whether they wanted to be part of the planning stages or part of the implementation stages later. So our commission, we were supposed to begin meeting just before COVID. We ended up just putting it all on hold and saying, let's get through all of this first. So everybody was busy with other projects, obviously, during that time. So we didn't meet officially until August of this year, just a month ago. And it was through many discussions during that time and emails back and forth, we had a little bit of an idea of what we wanted to accomplish. But when we finally met in August, we finalized our main thing that we wanted to accomplish, which was deciding on a theme for each year of the project. We wanted them to tie into local events, but we also wanted them to touch on this possibility of having a much wider reach, so that people could get creative. So your example of the Erie Canal is a great one, how to tie in something like the Erie Canal to a bicentennial project. We have others in our community, for instance, during the bicentennial in 1983, when it was ending and they were commemorating the Newburgh conspiracy, we rolled in the next year right into a large Edison commemoration, because Thomas Edison had been in Newburgh in 1884, and so on and so on. There were ways to tie it in back then, and there are ways now. So I won't go through every single theme. I can email anybody who's interested in them, but we came up with broad themes. So we took a local event, like in 1774, Henry Winsner was selected for the Continental Congress. And we said, okay, that's an event that we want to commemorate here, but we created a wider theme. We call it the Coming Storm. And this can tie into lots of local communities events, and even possibly beyond our own local county borders. We feel that everyone can find something that fits into that large category. And then so on, we went through events, tying the event into a larger theme. We have the large important theme of the defense of the Hudson that we're going to celebrate. I have it here in, I don't remember what year we chose for that one, or 1777, obviously, for Battle of Fort Montgomery. So we have, a specific battle to commemorate, but then we can tie it into this larger theme of the defense of the Hudson. And suddenly a county neighboring us, like Rockland County, who supplied the iron for the chain that went across the river, well, now they have a topic that they can get into, or so on. Every county can find a way to tie into the theme. So we've gotten a lot of traction that way. It's hard to take one county, Orange, Ulster, Rockland, or Dutchess, or any of these different locations around us, and try to have, and try to pretend that those borders mean something, because they really don't at this part of the war, especially when you had the local militias who were working together and supporting each other across the lines, and some of our counties that weren't even created at that time. So the borders were really different. So we're taking a very broad approach in that way, trying to work with our neighbors. And even on our current commission, we have one person who represents a historic site in Rockland County. And we have, other people who ties to other communities, and a big interest in working with Sullivan County because of the Battle of Minnesink that occurred in their borders currently, but was involved with both Native American warriors and also with our local militias that responded to that attack. So there's a lot of loose borders that we're dealing with, and I think our approach to that is just to widen that scope. I also should like to mention that, as John was saying about this almost like centralized attempt that was going on at that time to brand this commemoration, I think that's even more important this time around, because we live in a much more decentralized media world. So we're not all getting our news from the same 2 or 3 or 4 TV stations now. We're not going to see commercials if those commercials exist. I'm sure the national group is putting together some PR, and I've not turned on the TV and seen it, or picked up my phone to read an article and seen an ad for it. It's very hard to reach people today. And that is another reason why, as Devin is tapping into the regions and the counties, and then we're tapping into the local town and village historians and other stakeholders in the local historical societies and museums, we have to do that, because I think it's almost going to be a lot more word of mouth to get interest and attention into this project than it was at that time. And especially if we don't have a paid staff of 4 people working on the project from above. So I also see a need for coordinating calendars on the county level. So we're working with as many of the local stakeholders as we can. And also at our first meeting last month, the other thing that we did was we created we started to work on like different kinds of lists. So we started a list of all of the historic sites, the local history library rooms, the museums and historical sites, anything that ties in any way. We created a full list. We ended up with something like, I can't remember now, it was 65 museums and historical societies, and then another 20 or so local libraries that had a local history room. And we then put a star next to the ones that have a direct tie into the Revolutionary War. And we want to make sure that we're communicating with all of those locations so that as this commemoration takes place, everybody is putting their own take on the themes. And those can be very creative, and they can be, very modern or contemporary themes, but somehow tying it back in. I love the idea of asking for people to join as a community, as a bicentennial community. I would love to see that for the semi-quincentennial somehow. I don't know if that would be a state level or if that would be something on the county that we could even do to try to get buy-in from the local mayors and such. Just getting it in front of, I think, because it just accomplishes getting it in front of them, which is hard to do, hard to get their attention sometimes when they're doing so many different things. So I would be happy to answer any questions. And before I end, one more thing. The other thing that we're looking at is how to find any records that have not been digitized that relate to the revolution. So we already started that. One of our members of our commission went ahead on her own during the pandemic and found a record of loyalist forfeitures. And it was in a collection that was never seen by researchers for many, many decades. And she was able to get that digitized and put online already. So even though we're thinking about programming and events and themes, we're also trying to do the practical things of just getting more research into the hands of the local historians through digitizing those records.
I keep bringing that. One of the more important things is during the bicentennial was once you were a bicentennial community, you could apply for grants to the state. The state had a pile of money to give out to local communities. And so if you had a project, you could apply for a grant. And most of the people got those grants. Our project was, we got $1,200 to do 12 historic markers. Yes, the price of historic markers was $100 a piece at that time, and they were made of cast iron. And we got $1,200. And so our first 12 historic markers in our town were funded by the Bicentennial Commission. Will there be a pile of money for this?
Big pile. I just want to make a comment of Johanna's model of using the regional approach, even though she's running out of a county, but she's partnering with her other neighboring counties. That's really what we see at the state level as being vital, because as you noted, the boundaries changed or in some cases didn't exist. So we're seeing in the Hudson Valley specifically a regional approach emerging out of Westchester County and Orange County, Dutchess County, and also in the North Country. There's conversations taking place kind of under the umbrella of the Lake Champlain Heritage Area. In fact, they are going to be, if it's not already up, it may already be up, but they're going to be doing a grant program related to 250th stuff for their communities. So I just want to acknowledge the national heritage areas that we have, 4 of them that span the vast majority of the state. Lake Champlain, Hudson River Valley, we have the Erie Canal, of course, and the Niagara Heritage Area. So the federal agencies are starting to plan and are planning and are starting to do things like grant programming. I know that the Humanities, National Endowment of Humanities is having a 250th related grant program. I imagine that IMLS will, it hasn't yet, but so there's going to be, and at the state level, of course, we're discussing a funding level for the commission going forward and looking at what other states are doing, like New Jersey, which is funding it at $500,000 a year for 8 years. And now I make the argument that that's New Jersey. So New York should be several times that. And so we'll see what happens. You know, part of the issue is Johanna noted at the state level is getting interest and getting attention. Politicians don't look that far in the future normally. So it's almost the reaction you get a lot is, yeah, but that's, you're talking years down the road. And it's like, no, we need to be planning. They planned for 8 years for the bicentennial. So there will be funding. We don't know how much. But the other thing that I'll note is the America 250 Commission requires the states to have a commission or some sort of partnering organization. So it can be a not-for-profit or something designated by the states to receive federal funding. So that was one of the real things that did get attention in Albany was, hey, if we don't have a commission, we can't get federal money, and immediately there's a bill. You know, they don't know what their levels are going to be. They're dealing with Congress. We're dealing with, you know, our governor and our legislature about what funding levels will be. But the hope is to have an understanding that this is an opportunity. This is a watershed moment that comes along every 50 years. And it's an opportunity to expand on what the bicentennial did and reap the rewards really for the historical community.
No, yeah, I just want to speak to funding as well, because it's probably going to be the first question if we don't speak about it. So I don't have a lot of faith, sorry, in the state government. And I feel like if we don't originate these things on the bottom level and work up from the community level, that we're not going to see that kind of funding. So and partly that comes out of my experience, as I was mentioning, with the 1609, 2009 quadricentennial. That I was working at Washington's headquarters at the time. I was a tour guide. I was really enthusiastic to get involved with that project. And I called the state and I said, how can I get involved? And the answer was like, yeah, well, we don't have any money. We don't have any staff. We don't have anything going on. And I was so disappointed at the time. So I'm approaching that in the same way. Also the War of 1812, that was another bust, you know, where the state, we thought there was going to be some funding and there wasn't. So that's why I'm approaching this from a let's do it ourselves perspective. If the money comes down the road, that would be great, but it might not. So what I did was I kind of double played it as well. I said to my local, when I got that commission created, I said to my local representatives, we need to have this commission in order to be ready to receive funds when they come. You know, that was one way of getting the urgency there. So that's a good ploy, you know, as far as on your local level to tell your politicians that there might be money in the future. But I'm also operating from this perspective of there might not be. So that is why I asked the local legislature to put a $5,000 budget together to at least get us started in the planning stages. So we'd have a yearly budget to work with for a little bit of PR or coordination, or even just to pay for some coffee at events when we're holding forums. I mean, just something to get started. And my idea was that as we move forward, we would have the commission create better budgets. And then we would be able to tell them exactly what we need. And maybe that would be a larger number. And I just recently heard Saratoga's they're asking for a bigger number, or they got a bigger number. So now I'm going to use that because I'm going to go back to my legislature and say, well, look how much money Saratoga got. And we need to increase our budgets.
Yet, so
I'll pass.
Yes. Yeah, I'll just speak briefly, but I'm at Saratoga County. We just passed a resolution. So I work under a board of supervisors for my government. And we passed a resolution in August that created the Saratoga County 250 Commission. It looks a lot like Johanna's, which is also what it looked like in 1976. The county had a commission. It was a 13-member commission, which is also what we're doing. So one of the things that I just wanted to mention was I think there's room for both singular events to be planned, but also for a lasting impact, thinking about infrastructure that will last beyond a fireworks display. I'm not saying, you know, that a fireworks display is important too, but if you want to start thinking about things that will last beyond the end of the commission anniversary. So things like signage, maybe trails, putting money into trails, heritage trails, things like that will stay in our communities and will continue to benefit heritage tourism and things like that past the end of 2033. So I would think along both lines for that. We, of course, we have the Saratoga battlefield within our county borders. And like Johanna said, actually, Saratoga County was not created until 1791. We are part of Albany County when the battles happened. So the regional approach also works for us. And but obviously 2027 is going to be a big year for us. And one of the things that I'm worried about, because it's such a long duration, is anniversary fatigue. So, we have a very long time to do this. And I think if we put plans in place, I think we have to be reasonable and not go so gung-ho in 2026 and 2027 that there's nothing left for the end of the revolution. So if we start planning those things and putting money, if possible, funding ahead of time so that it can last, I think that's an important thing to look at. Oh, the last thing I want to mention was one of the ideas that we are planning to implement is similar to what the bicentennial communities is. And what we're hoping to do is create a logo for our own county commission. And then we would ask the communities, towns, cities, villages within our county to become a Saratoga 250 community. And we would do something similar. We would have them submit a letter stating, that they have some ideas to be a part of this. And then we would provide let's say, it's always easier if you make a draft resolution that you can hand to your town or city historians and say, here, fill this in with your community and ask your town board or your city council, whatever it is. Once you pass this resolution, you can become a Saratoga County 250 community, and that will make you available to apply for grant funding if the county can make some funding available for the communities within it. But it does allow us to do some branding so that we're all using the same kind of logo, and the flag idea of having people, fly a flag at the community level, where we can incorporate the federal logo, the state logo, and our county logo. So that we're all tied together with communities. So that might be something that other people want to look at. And I think that's, I just wanted to say one more thing about funding, because that's always the main problem. We're thinking about creating a friends group, because many of us at the municipal level can't take in donations from local communities. And I can guarantee you that there are local businesses and groups in your community that will want to donate to this, to these commemorations. So you may want to think about creating a nonprofit friends group so that you can accept donations, because we are, as we know, we won't be able to fund everything from a government level that we want to do. So it's up to us to go out in the communities and look for things like in-kind services. Can you donate portable toilets for our event? Can you donate land or a space or something like that? So we should start thinking about those, the people in our communities that may be willing to do that also. Okay, so now I'll open it up if anybody wants to ask any questions or talk about what their plans are. I'll bring the microphone around so that everyone online can hear.
Hi, Gary Amherst from Schuyler County. I was just going to suggest that maybe another thing to look at is you have Humanities New York, and they do these reading and discussion groups. And I've done some of them before, and it would be good to, you could generate some interest in all of this, as well as address some of the diversity you'd like to see. If you could put together a suggested reading list for them to use for one of their reading discussion groups. You could talk about women in the revolution, as well as African Americans revolution, as well as, things after revolution, like with books like The Shoemaker and the Tea Party by Al Young, those kind of things. I think that would help really generate some interest at the local level across the state by doing something like that. So.
It's a great idea. And we've certainly been talking to Humanities New York and Sarah, but not specifically about that. We've been talking more about what the National Endowment's going to be doing, and then how the state humanities councils are going to be dispersing funding. But I think that's a fantastic idea. I know the program you're talking about. I think it would be a good idea to have that conversation. So thank you.
And here's a publication that was done for the bicentennial on that very subject. So
Hi, I'm Judy Wellman from Fulton, New York. I know the Underground Railroad Commission or Consortium of New York State is thinking about the 200th anniversary of the end of slavery in New York, which is July 4th, 1770, whatever, 1827, yeah. Get it out. So I hope that's included. And on that vein, you mentioned, Devin, the inclusion of a variety of people, including Indigenous people. I'm wondering what kind of outreach could be made or is being made to Native people, Haudenosaunee people.
So that's a great question. And we had one of our listening meetings, the four we had before COVID, they were in 2019. We had one at Saratoga, one at Iona College, the Thomas Paine Institute, one in New York City at New York Historical, and one at Ganondagan. And it was there was a reason for having it at Ganondagan. It's our only Native American state historic site. And we invited members from all of the nations to come. And of course, not everyone did, but there was good representation. And we had a good discussion there. And those discussions have continued. We had a discussion last week, actually, with representatives from some of the nations. Some have chosen not to engage thus far, although we keep asking and trying. But one of the things that came out of these earlier discussions and has led to kind of this mini working group is this idea of telling the Native perspective as part of this history with authentic Native voices telling the history. And that was very important to this group, and continues to be an opportunity, I think, to engage with, again, a community in some cases that was not engaged with before. In some cases, of course, the nations are all different. Some have, are happy to engage, and they were on the side of, the United States, what became the United States. So they have that kind of pride. Others were not on the colonial side and had been displaced and their lands taken after the revolution. So there's that side of it too. So the conversation is difficult. I mean, frankly, I try to not say anything. I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to be informed as to how to proceed. But it is a difficult process, and but it's essential. One of the things I keep saying is that we can't have this without them at some level. And we can't talk about the revolution without talking about the displacement of the Native people that were here. And so I'm optimistic because there is interest. There are people that were on this call that represent the Native communities, and they are interested in creating. We're not sure what it's going to look like yet. They're calling it a guide. It'll most likely be an online, possibly published and printed, but it's an opportunity to act as a guide for organizations to how to engage with this history, how to engage with the communities, and it would be something that the state, facilitates, but does not drive the content.
And on our local level, we chose the year 2029, which is going to be our year that's entirely themed on the Native perspective. So on the local level, we've made an attempt at that, particularly because of the Battle of Minnesink and Joseph Brant. There's a group out of the Deer Park area, the western part of Orange County along the Delaware River, who have for many years, probably since the bicentennial, have had an annual Joseph Brant Day where they do bus tours, and they bring school children through all of the locations that were raided by the natives and where the retaliation sites were. And so we have an entire year dedicated to that.
Yeah, and 79 obviously is, the Sullivan Clinton campaign as well. And that's come up in all of these discussions that we've had with the Native representatives. as well as the markers and how problematic those markers are to this day. So we have a lot of work to do. It's clear to me that this can't just be a, let's meet once in a while type thing. That's why I'm happy that there's this idea of this guide. So it's a product that can come out of this that will help the field, I think, help museums, help historians, kind of deal with this history and know how to engage. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, we've talked about the Sullivan campaign and, how do we handle that, and it's complex and I think the way forward is to not run from the history.
I got it, John.
My question is to Johanna. I want to understand this county commission. You said you have a county executive,
We have a county executive and we have a legislature.
right? That's what we have in Suffolk County.
Mhm.
And you also said that they have funded $5,000 per year,
Mhm.
starting from when the commission
Yes.
started.
So I can explain that a little bit. I'm a little bit in a different situation than a lot of the local historians here. I'm the Orange County historian and I'm in my own department. So I'm a department head, which means I write the budget for my department.
Okay.
And that is a little bit of a distinction because I know several county historians are in the clerk's department or they're in, some other department or they're not a standalone. So that gave me the advantage to be able to put it in the budget as a proposal. So we have a budget cycle. I went in May, met with the finance department and budget department and said, I've increased my celebrations line by $5,000 for the purpose of the semiquincentennial. And this is going to be something that we put in every single year from now on.
Through 2033.
Through 2033. Then and obviously every year I have to do a new budget. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, once we know really what we want to do, we'll be able to ask for an exact number amount. Right now, we just put in 5,000 as a guess of what it's going to take right now.
Okay.
But then the COVID situation hit and we were all asked across the board to cut our budgets down significantly.
Mhm.
So my budget went down 50%, 50%. Anything that was a public program got just taken right out of that budget. And 50% sounds like a lot, but I have a very small budget. So I'm talking about maybe I have about $20,000 in discretionary funds and then, it's not a lot of money. So all that money got wiped out. And the only things that remained in the budget were things like exhibits and things that we could do remotely, planning type money.
But you still have this.
Well, so then we came back.
line
So then
for
so we left it empty, zeroed it out. Then COVID, now at this point, we've been told we can go back, we can resume our budgets. So for this year, coming into 2021, they've restored it.
Okay.
So it's now restored. But I have to mention that because there's that little hiccup of COVID. But we're proceeding now with the idea that we're going to grow it year to year. And we have discussions in our sessions that, with our group that's been coming together about how to spend that money. And we do have some ideas, which I can talk to you about if you
Mhm.
want to know those things, but we have some ideas of how we're going to spend the money now and what we're going to ask for in the future.
We're kind of in a totally different position in Suffolk County, but I was interested to hear that.
The opposite of me would be Westchester County, where they
Okay.
don't have a county historian and they've formed a nonprofit instead. And you might want to talk to some of the people in Westchester if you think you fit their model better.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And Barbara, I'll say we did the same thing for our county commission. We created a line in the budget for it. Okay, I have a comment coming in online from Cliff Patrick, who's the town of Chester historian. Remembering how traumatic the revolution was to all the inhabitants of the colonies, the stories of loyalists and those who attempted to remain neutral should not be forgotten. And then a question for Devin from Peter Feynman. What will the staffing be in the historian's office for the bicentennial, especially with all the other anniversaries like Lafayette's return NYS OPRH, Indian Citizenship Act, Erie Canal, slavery abolition, and the Constitution.
There's going to be a couple hundred people brought on to handle this. Honestly, I don't know. We haven't talked about staffing. We're talking more about how do we administer a program with what we have. And, and that's why the model of working with state parks and the state museum and the people who are there now, that's what we're kind of assuming is going to happen. Like Johanna said, it'd be nice if they suddenly open things up and we can hire people, but I don't see that happening right now. So not that we're not going to try, but we have to be proactive and move forward with the model that we have right now. And so that's what we're doing. I do know that, the resources of like the State Museum, it's not just going to be me. It's not just me now that's working on this. So it's there is a staff that will be dedicated to the commission work going forward. And I'm assuming the same thing at Parks.
We have time for maybe one more question. Comments?
I have a
Okay.
question.
Well, thank you all very much for attending. Thank you so much to the panelists. And I'm sure, I don't know, we didn't put any contact information up, but yeah, hopefully we can all figure out how to contact, but come up and speak with them, or we could try to put something together that has contact information if you're interested in sharing ideas or asking how they've done certain things. So good luck in your planning, and thank you very much.